I am Haley. I am 25 years old. And exactly 2 weeks ago, I very nearly died entirely alone on my kitchen floor, violently suffocating to death while my entire extended family was joyously celebrating my twin sister's massive milestone birthday party, a lavish, expensive party that I was maliciously, intentionally not invited to attend. When the emergency paramedic desperately asked me to provide my emergency contacts, I let out a dark, bitter laugh. I absolutely do not possess any, I choked out. But then he looked at me with an incredibly strange, horrified expression and stated, "Ma'am, your twin sister is actually the specific individual who called this medical emergency in, and she explicitly told our dispatchers something terrifyingly different." That single horrific sentence permanently changed the entire trajectory of my existence. Because exactly what Harper had told the 911 dispatchers wasn't simply a different version of events. It was a highly calculated, malicious lie, explicitly designed to ensure I would absolutely never wake up to tell my side of the story. Before I drag you backward to exactly where this entire nightmare originated, please take a brief moment to engage with this video, but I ask that you only do so if this harrowing story of survival truly, deeply resonates within your soul. And please, drop a comment below letting me know exactly where in the world you are currently watching from and what time it is ticking on your clock. Now, I deeply need to pull you backward 4 excruciating weeks to the specific, terrifying day my beloved grandmother violently collapsed. The dreaded phone call arrived at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was peacefully shelving classic literature in the children's section at the local municipal library when my cell phone unexpectedly buzzed in my apron pocket. It was a completely unknown local number. I almost instinctively ignored the call. "Miss Parsons," the clinical voice on the line stated. "This is the emergency ward at Mercy General Hospital. Your grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, was just aggressively brought in by paramedics. She has suffered a massive, severe stroke." The solid floor literally felt as though it violently tilted beneath my feet. I honestly do not remember frantically grabbing my winter coat. I absolutely do not remember driving my vehicle. I only vividly remember blindly sprinting through those sterile, blindingly white hospital hallways until I finally located her assigned room. Grandma Eleanor looked impossibly, heartbreakingly small resting in that massive, mechanical hospital bed. Thick, translucent tubes ran everywhere. Aggressive medical monitors beeped rhythmically. Her beautiful, silver hair was spread messily across the thin pillow exactly like a halo she had fiercely earned after 78 years of pure, unadulterated kindness in this world. I slowly pulled a plastic chair incredibly close to her side and desperately took her hand. Her skin was terrifyingly cold. I fiercely held it anyway. She was literally the absolute only person in my entire bloodline who had ever bothered to hold mine. Every single Sunday afternoon for the past 6 consecutive years, I had faithfully driven 40 minutes out to her sprawling house. We would joyously bake her famous lemon cookies from scratch. She would tell me incredible, vibrant stories about my late grandfather. She would constantly, gently ask if I was actively eating enough food, if I was sleeping enough hours, if I was genuinely living my life to the fullest. "You strongly remind me of him," she would always whisper, patting my cheek. "You inherently love incredibly quietly, Haley, but you love incredibly deeply. Do absolutely not ever let anyone maliciously tell you that your quiet love is a weakness." My mother absolutely never bothered to visit her. She claimed she was entirely too consumed by her social calendar. Harper absolutely never visited her. She arrogantly claimed she was entirely too important and busy. But I faithfully showed up every single solitary week. The attending physician abruptly appeared in the doorway. He looked incredibly young and profoundly exhausted, tightly gripping a thick medical clipboard. "She is currently medically stable for the moment," he stated grimly, "but she has slipped into a deep coma. We honestly do not know exactly when or even if she will ever wake up. I offered a slow, terrified nod. I physically couldn't force my vocal cords to speak. Is there any other immediate family we should urgently contact? He asked. I will aggressively call them right now, I whispered. I sat entirely alone in that sterile room for 30 agonizing minutes before absolutely anyone else bothered to arrive. 30 entire minutes of desperately holding her cold hand, fiercely whispering that I was right there, that she was absolutely not alone in the dark. I possessed absolutely no idea then that I would ultimately be the one who ended up entirely, utterly alone. The sharp, aggressive clicking of expensive designer heels loudly announced my mother's arrival long before I actually saw her face. Victoria Parsons aggressively swept into the small hospital room exactly as if she legally owned the entire building. She carried a massive designer handbag, her expensive hair perfectly blown out, and her facial features meticulously arranged into what she had highly likely practiced in the mirror as the deeply concerned daughter expression. Harper lazily trailed directly behind her, her smartphone permanently glued to her hand, already frantically texting someone about the drama. My identical twin sister. We shared the exact same physical face, the exact same birth date, but we occupied two completely, entirely different universes. My father trailed in at the absolute rear. Greg Parsons. Incredibly quiet, entirely passive, exactly as always. He briefly glanced at me and then immediately, cowardly looked away. Exactly how long have you been sitting here? Mom demanded. She absolutely did not offer me a hug. She absolutely did not ask if I was emotionally okay. Approximately 30 minutes, I replied softly. She aggressively walked right past me, marching directly to Grandma's bedside and intently studied the complex medical monitors exactly as if she possessed the medical degree required to understand them. Has the attending doctor stated anything concrete regarding her actual prognosis? She is currently in a deep coma. They honestly do not know when she will wake up. Harper finally bothered to look up from her glowing phone screen. Oh, you actually managed to show up. I honestly assumed you would predictably be entirely too sick to bother coming. The malicious words aggressively landed exactly like a physical slap to the face, flawlessly delivered with a sickeningly sweet, artificial smile of course. That was Harper's ultimate specialty. I am completely fine, I stated coldly. Are you truly, though? She mockingly tilted her head. You look incredibly tired, extremely pale. You really should aggressively try to take significantly better care of yourself. Mom aggressively cut in before I could formulate a defense. Haley, immediately go down to the cafeteria and fetch us some coffee. We urgently need to discuss matters with the doctor entirely privately. I stood completely frozen for a long moment, desperately waiting for Dad to finally step up and say something in my defense. He remained utterly silent, staring at the floor. So I turned and left. But I absolutely did not walk very far away. I deliberately stopped just outside the heavy wooden door, pretending to be deeply engrossed in checking my cell phone. Through the narrow gap in the doorway, I clearly heard my mother's voice. It was incredibly low, heavily urgent, and entirely devoid of grief. Has she explicitly said anything recently regarding the final status of her will? The blood in my veins instantly ran freezing cold. Grandma was literally lying in that bed, highly possibly actively dying, and my mother's absolute very first urgent concern was securing the inheritance money. I numbly walked toward the vending machines on violently shaking legs. I absolutely did not know it yet. But that specific, greedy question would ultimately cost them absolutely everything they possessed. My tiny apartment felt significantly smaller and more suffocating than usual. That night, it was a cramped, 600 square foot, one-bedroom unit, featuring a kitchen roughly the size of a utility closet. I had lovingly decorated it entirely with cheap thrift store finds and dozens of vibrant house plants that I frequently talked to out loud whenever the crushing loneliness became too heavy. Harper's sprawling, luxury penthouse downtown boasted massive, floor-to-ceiling windows and a uniformed doorman who respectfully greeted her by name. I sat heavily on my battered, secondhand couch, blankly staring at my glowing phone screen. The Parsons family group chat was aggressively active. For the absolute first time in several months, Mom had imperiously typed, "Mandatory family meeting tomorrow morning. Exactly 10 a.m. at my house." Regarding Mother's impending medical care, Harper immediately responded, "I will absolutely be there. I have already proactively cleared my entire schedule." Absolutely no one bothered to ask if the mandated time worked for my employment schedule. Absolutely no one ever did. I slowly scrolled upward through the ancient, archived messages. Endless months of suffocating silence sporadically, punctuated by glossy, curated photographs of Harper's massive life. Achievements, her lucrative corporate promotion, her wealthy new boyfriend, her lavish weekend ski trips. I was absolutely not included or mentioned in a single one of them. I slowly opened my nightstand drawer, the specific, secure drawer where I meticulously kept the truly important things: my passport, my original birth certificate, and a highly specific, sealed letter. The thick envelope was noticeably yellowed with age, the cursive handwriting across the front incredibly shaky. Grandma Eleanor had explicitly handed it to me exactly 3 years ago during one of our peaceful Sunday afternoon visits. "Keep this document. Incredibly safe," she had whispered fiercely, pressing it into my hands. "Someday, in the distant future, when I am permanently gone, a specific man named Mr. Bennett will aggressively seek you out. He serves as my private attorney. He will explicitly explain absolutely everything to you." I had gently asked her exactly what she meant by those cryptic words. She simply offered a sad smile and seamlessly changed the subject. I absolutely never pushed the boundary. Perhaps I absolutely should have. I carefully pulled the fragile letter out and read it again now, desperately searching the ink for hidden clues. "My dearest, beautiful Haley, if you are currently reading these words, things have highly likely gotten incredibly, terrifyingly complicated within the family. I desperately want you to explicitly know that I truly see your soul. I have inherently always seen you clearly, and I have meticulously made absolute certain that you will be comprehensively taken care of, absolutely no matter what malicious schemes your mother eventually attempts to execute. Blindly trust Mr. Bennett. He explicitly knows the unvarnished truth. All my eternal love, Grandma." I carefully folded the fragile paper and securely placed it back inside the drawer. Who exactly was this mysterious Mr. Bennett? And what explosive, hidden truth was Grandma desperately concealing? I arrived at my mother's sprawling suburban house at exactly 10 o'clock the next morning. The massive formal living room was already aggressively arranged, exactly like a hostile courtroom. Mom sat imperiously in the oversized armchair, treating it exactly like a throne. Harper slouched comfortably on the expensive love seat, her legs elegantly crossed, sipping premium coffee. Dad was entirely sequestered in the far, dark corner, remaining completely invisible and silent. Exactly as always. I awkwardly took the absolute only empty seat remaining in the room. A hard, wooden dining chair that someone had clearly dragged in specifically for me. Incredibly uncomfortable. Highly likely intentional. "Now that we are finally all gathered here," Mom began, her tone clipping, "we urgently need to discuss Mother's ongoing medical care. The hospital administration is aggressively inquiring about designating an official medical proxy. I can easily do it," I volunteered immediately. "I faithfully visit her every single week. I intimately know all of her attending doctors, her complex medication schedule. Her That will absolutely not be necessary," Mom interrupted, her smile absolutely not reaching her freezing eyes. "We have already collectively decided that Harper will serve as her official medical proxy. She is significantly more stable and capable." Harper offered a smug nod, exactly as if this decision were an undeniable, universal truth. I possess a highly flexible, lucrative corporate schedule. And honestly, Haley, you can barely manage to take care of your own basic survival with your severe allergies. My severe allergies possess absolutely nothing to do with. Do you explicitly remember last Thanksgiving? Harper's voice aggressively dripped with entirely false, weaponized concern. You suffered a massive allergic reaction and completely ruined the entire holiday dinner. Absolutely everyone was forced to leave the house early. I accidentally consumed a side dish that I explicitly did not know contained hidden tree nuts. That was entirely an accident. The specific details are entirely beside the point. Mom aggressively cut in. We desperately require someone highly reliable and competent in charge. The decision is permanently finalized. I looked desperately at Dad in the corner. He was intensely studying the scuff marks on his expensive leather shoes. Fine. The single word tasted exactly like bitter ash in my mouth. Good. Mom aggressively stood up. This meeting is officially adjourned. Oh, and by the way, Harper's massive 20th birthday bash is scheduled for next Saturday evening. We are aggressively keeping the guest list incredibly small and intimate. Immediate family and elite friends only. I sat perfectly still and waited for the rest of the sentence. Absolutely nothing came. Harper briefly caught my eye and offered a vicious, tiny smirk. Just slightly. Just exactly enough to twist the knife. What exactly about my birthday celebration? I asked quietly. It is literally the exact same day. Mom aggressively waved her manicured hand in the air. You inherently never truly enjoy loud parties anyway, Haley. With all that catered food you constantly claim you cannot safely eat. This arrangement is simply significantly easier for everyone involved. I drove back to my tiny apartment in absolute, suffocating silence. 25 entire years of consistently being the discarded afterthought. 25 years of being labeled the difficult, defective one. I was incredibly, profoundly tired. So utterly, bone-deep tired. But I absolutely did not possess a single clue yet that being merely tired was about to become the absolute least of my terrifying problems. The mysterious package arrived late Friday evening. I was quietly standing in my cramped kitchen, meticulously preparing a highly safe, incredibly boring dinner. Plain grilled chicken breast, steamed green vegetables. Absolutely nothing that could conceivably trigger a severe, life-threatening allergic reaction. The doorbell abruptly rang. I opened the door, but absolutely no one was standing in the hallway. Just a pristine, pale pink bakery box resting exactly on my doormat, beautifully tied with a shimmering silver ribbon. I cautiously brought the box inside my apartment, deeply confused. I checked the small attached card. Happy 25th birthday, sis. I am so incredibly sorry I have been acting so distant and cold lately. Here is something sweet explicitly for you to enjoy. Please have a wonderful day tomorrow. Love, Harper. My absolute first primal instinct was to aggressively throw the entire box directly into the garbage incinerator. But sheer, morbid curiosity won the battle, and I carefully opened the lid. Resting perfectly inside were 6 incredibly massive, beautifully decorated vanilla cupcakes adorned with intricate, edible floral designs. They looked incredibly expensive and highly professional. I closely examined the printed label on the box. Sweet Beginnings Bakery. The highly specific, entirely nut-free, allergy-safe bakery I had casually mentioned loving several years ago. The absolute only bakery in the entire city I completely trusted to consume goods from. I stood there staring intensely at those cupcakes for a very long time. A massive, logical part of my brain aggressively screamed that this was highly, terrifyingly suspicious. Harper had absolutely never, ever apologized for a single malicious thing in her entire life. Why on earth would she miraculously start today? But another pathetic, deeply buried part of my soul the exact, fragile part that still tragically remembered us as innocent. Kids playing together before the toxic favoritism destroyed everything. That naive part softly whispered, what if she is actually, genuinely trying to make amends? What if the horrific party snub was entirely Mom's malicious idea, and Harper felt immense, suffocating guilt over it? I violently hated that specific part of me. The pathetic part that still desperately, hopelessly wanted my twin sister to actually love me. I slowly set the pink box down onto the kitchen counter. I firmly decided to sleep on the decision. Perhaps I would simply throw them in the trash tomorrow morning. But by the time the morning sun rose, crushing loneliness had entirely won the battle. Maybe. I stared at the pristine cupcake resting on the counter. I ultimately decided to save them for later today. Today was officially my milestone. Birthday. Our shared birthday. If I absolutely couldn't celebrate surrounded by family, at the very least, I would have premium cake. I left the pink box resting on the counter and returned to eating my incredibly boring, safe dinner. But something sharp aggressively nagged at the back of my mind. I slowly picked up the small greeting card again and intensely studied the handwriting. Harper's usual handwriting was incredibly sharp, bold, and highly confident, exactly matching her arrogant personality. The cursive writing on this specific card was noticeably shaky, erratic, almost incredibly nervous. She was probably just hastily writing it in a massive rush, I desperately rationalized to myself. I actually took a quick photograph of the beautiful cupcakes, almost deciding to post it to my Instagram feed to thank her. But some deep, primal instinct violently stopped me from hitting send. That specific night, I experienced a terrifying, vivid nightmare about Grandma Eleanor. She was frantically attempting to communicate something vital to me, but I absolutely couldn't hear her voice. She kept aggressively pointing a trembling finger directly toward my kitchen, specifically pointing at the pink bakery box, but absolutely zero sound emerged from her mouth. I violently woke up at exactly 3 a.m., my heart racing uncontrollably, drenched in a cold sweat. I absolutely should have listened to that nightmare. November 14th. My milestone 25th birthday. I woke up to absolute, suffocating silence. 0 phone calls. 0 text messages. Absolutely no happy birthday, Haley, from a single human being on Earth. I frantically checked my phone screen 3 consecutive times before finally accepting the brutal, agonizing truth. They had completely, intentionally forgotten. Or, infinitely worse, they absolutely hadn't forgotten the date at all. They just simply did not care that I existed. By exactly noon, I completely gave up hopelessly waiting. I mindlessly opened the Instagram application instead. It was a catastrophic mistake. Harper's elaborate, highly produced story was already live and trending. Dozens upon dozens of slides. A massive, sprawling backyard event. Tent beautifully strung with thousands of glowing fairy lights. A towering 3-tier custom cake featuring Happy 25th Birthday Harper. Displayed in massive gold lettering. Over 200 elegantly dressed guests. A hired professional event photographer capturing every angle. Mom's glowing, public post immediately followed. I am so incredibly, profoundly proud of my beautiful, flawless daughter, Harper. 25 entire years of pure, unadulterated blessing. Hashtag proud mom. Hashtag birthday queen. I slowly, agonizingly scrolled through every single posted photograph. I was absolutely not physically present in any of them. I was not even tagged or casually mentioned in a single caption. The primary caption proudly stated, surrounded by absolutely everyone I love in the world. And I, her biological twin sister, the woman who shared a womb with her, born exactly 7 minutes after her, was maliciously excluded. I sat heavily on my cheap kitchen linoleum floor for a very long while, just taking shallow breaths, aggressively trying not to violently break down and cry. Then, I slowly looked up and saw the pristine pink box resting on the counter. The safe cupcakes. I carefully pulled exactly one out, firmly stuck a single cheap candle into the frosting, and lit the wick with a violently shaking hand. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered softly into the empty apartment. The tiny flame flickered pathetically. I blew it out. Absolutely no one clapped. Absolutely no one sang. Absolutely no one even knew I was alive. I slowly peeled back the decorative paper wrapper and took a small, hesitant bite. Rich vanilla. Incredibly sweet. But then, a faint, almost imperceptible hint of something distinctly nutty lingering underneath the sugar. I immediately stopped chewing. Nutty? I frantically stared down at the half-eaten cupcake. Really, truly looked at it. The texture of the premium frosting was slightly, noticeably grainy. The consistency of the cake base was entirely wrong. My throat instantly, aggressively started to itch with a terrifying, familiar intensity. No, 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 no. I violently spat out absolutely everything I possibly could into the sink, but it was already entirely too late. The highly familiar, terrifying tightness was already rapidly spreading down my throat. My lips began to tingle violently. My tongue began to aggressively swell inside my mouth. Almond flour. The safe cupcakes were heavily baked using pure almond flour. Exactly 10 minutes later, I literally could not pull oxygen into my lungs. I desperately, blindly crawled across the floor toward my purse. EpiPen. I urgently needed my life-saving EpiPen. My shaking hands frantically tore through the contents of the bag: wallet, keys, chapstick, old receipts, the empty plastic case. I had tragically forgotten to refill my expired prescription at the pharmacy again. The entire room was violently spinning now, the edges of my vision going completely black, my compromised airway aggressively closing. Exactly like a tightening fist. Every single desperate gasp for air was a brutal battle I was rapidly losing. Phone. Where exactly was my cell phone? I frantically located it resting on the kitchen counter. I clumsily knocked it onto the floor, desperately grabbed it, and managed to dial exactly 3 numbers. 911, 911, what is your exact emergency? Anaphylactic shock. The words barely rasped out of my closing throat. Can't breathe. Emergency medical help is currently on the way, ma'am. Can you clearly state your exact address for me? I choked out my street name, my specific apartment number. Please stay on the line with me. Is there absolutely anyone physically present with you right now? No. The word barely managed to escape my lips. I am entirely alone. Do you possess any emergency contacts? Someone we should urgently call on your behalf? I actually let out a dark, breathless laugh. It emerged sounding exactly like a horrific wheeze. I absolutely do not possess any. A heavy pause hung on the line. Then, the 911 operator's vocal tone violently shifted, sounding deeply confused and hesitant. Ma'am, we actually just received a secondary call regarding your specific location. Just exactly 2 minutes prior to your call. It was initiated by a woman named Harper Parsons. The entire room violently tilted on its axis. What? She explicitly informed our dispatchers that you possess a long, documented history of wildly exaggerating allergic reactions. She stated that you frequently execute this exact behavior purely for dramatic attention. She explicitly requested that we absolutely do not take the emergency call too seriously. I literally could not process the horrific information. I physically couldn't think. Harper maliciously called 911 immediately prior to my desperate call, explicitly to ensure the paramedics would assume I was faking it. Exactly how on earth did she mathematically know I would suffer a severe allergic reaction tonight? Exactly how did she know? The terrifying question violently echoed in my rapidly darkening mind as my body finally collapsed completely onto the cold kitchen floor. The half-eaten cupcake lay directly next to my face, looking completely innocent and sweet. The absolute last sound I Registered before passing out into the black void was the faint wail of distant sirens. The paramedics were coming, but my own biological twin sister had meticulously, aggressively attempted to ensure they absolutely wouldn't rush to save me. My very own sister had actively, maliciously attempted to let me suffocate to death. I violently woke up inside a speeding ambulance. Blinding, harsh fluorescent lights. A heavy oxygen mask strapped tightly to my face. A sharp, throbbing sting in my outer thigh exactly where someone had aggressively jabbed in. Emergency EpiPen. There she is. A man's calm face slowly came into sharp focus. Above me, he possessed warm brown eyes and a highly professional, serious demeanor. His name tag clearly read, Daniel Mitchell, lead paramedic. You certainly gave our crew a massive scare tonight. I desperately tried to speak, but the heavy plastic mask completely muffled my words. Take it easy, he instructed gently. You are currently medically stable. We are almost arriving at the hospital trauma bay. I offered a weak nod and closed my exhausted eyes, but Daniel absolutely wasn't finished speaking. Miss Parsons, I urgently need to ask you a highly critical question. His vocal tone dropped significantly lower, becoming intensely serious. Your sister, Harper, actively called the 911 dispatch center approximately 15 minutes prior to your emergency call. My eyes instantly snapped wide open in terror. She maliciously told our dispatchers that you possess a documented history of faking severe allergic reactions purely for dramatic attention. She explicitly instructed us that we should absolutely not treat the call as a severe, life-threatening emergency, that you are inherently dramatic. I desperately pulled the oxygen mask slightly down from my face. That is absolutely, entirely untrue. I know it is. He aggressively held up my digital medical chart. Your physical vitals absolutely do not possess the capacity to lie. Your blood oxygen saturation was plummeting at a lethal 82%. When we breached the apartment, your airway was nearly 100% closed. You were literally, actively dying for real. I stared at him in absolute, unadulterated shock. I have been aggressively performing this medical job for 8 long years, Daniel continued softly. I inherently know exactly when an individual is faking an illness, and I explicitly know exactly when someone is actively, maliciously attempting to cover something horrific up. He remained completely quiet for a heavy, agonizing moment. Then, my own younger sister tragically experienced a highly similar, horrific situation. Vastly different specific circumstances, but she possessed toxic family members who actively, maliciously tried to physically hurt her and then manipulate the narrative to make her look completely insane. She tragically did not survive the abuse. I absolutely did not know what to say to him. I couldn't save her in time, he stated, his voice thick with unresolved grief. But perhaps I can actively help you survive this, if you actually want my help. Cover exactly what? Up? He did not answer my question directly, but simply studied my face with his careful, observant eyes. How exactly did your sister possess the psychic knowledge that you would suffer a massive reaction tonight? Did you explicitly inform her you were consuming something dangerous? I slowly, terrifiedly shook my head. She maliciously sent me the bakery cupcakes, I whispered, tears finally falling. As a birthday gift. Daniel's facial expression violently shifted. Something incredibly dark and dangerous passed deeply behind his kind eyes. I am going to ask you a massive question, and I desperately need you to think incredibly carefully before you answer. Did your sister Harper explicitly know about your lethal almond allergy? I absolutely did not have to think about it for a single microsecond. She has explicitly known about it since we were exactly 7 years old. Daniel said absolutely nothing in response, but his deafening silence communicated absolutely everything I needed to know. The sterile hospital recovery room was incredibly quiet. Entirely too quiet. The highly specific, suffocating kind of silence that aggressively presses against your eardrums and violently reminds you exactly how utterly alone you truly are in this world. I had been recovering in this bed for over 6 entire hours. 0 visitors. 0 phone calls checking on my survival. My biological family was highly likely still joyously celebrating at Harper's massive, lavish birthday party, toasting to her vibrant health, her massive success, her perfect existence. Meanwhile, I had quite literally almost suffocated to death on my own kitchen floor. My cell phone suddenly vibrated on the bedside table. It was an entirely unknown local number. I almost aggressively ignored the call, exactly like I had almost ignored the hospital's call regarding Grandma Eleanor. But some primal, desperate instinct explicitly told me to answer the device this time. Miss Haley Parsons? A man's deep voice inquired. Highly professional, meticulously measured. Yes, my name is Richard Bennett. I serve as your late grandmother's primary estate attorney. I violently sat up in the hospital bed, entirely too fast, violently wincing as the movement aggressively tugged the 4-line tape to my arm. Mr. Bennett. The exact name from Grandma's hidden letter. A heavy pause hung on the line. She explicitly told you about my existence. She physically handed me a sealed letter exactly 3 years ago. She explicitly stated you would actively find me when the precise time finally arrived. The exact time has officially arrived. His voice was incredibly gentle, but laced with intense, terrifying urgency. I was discreetly informed about your severe hospitalization through a highly trusted contact employed at Mercy General. Your grandmother is currently residing in that exact same facility. I completely understand the situation. Miss Parsons, we urgently need to have a confidential discussion tonight if it is physically possible. I am absolutely not currently in a medical position to travel anywhere, I replied. I will discreetly come directly to your room. I currently possess something highly explosive, a highly specific legal document your grandmother meticulously prepared long before she suffered the stroke. She explicitly asked me to deliver it to you entirely, personally, if absolutely anything horrific ever happened to her. He paused heavily. Or if absolutely anything horrific ever happened to you. My heart began to aggressively hammer against my ribs. What exact kind of legal document? I would vastly prefer to explain the complexities in person. May I please come by the hospital first thing in the morning? I rapidly agreed. What other viable choice did I possibly possess? After disconnecting the call, I frantically pulled Grandma's yellowed letter from my purse. I had aggressively, permanently, kept it on my person. I read it yet again. Trust Mr. Bennett. He explicitly knows the unvarnished truth. Tomorrow morning, I would finally, completely find out exactly what that explosive truth actually was. But that entire night I lay, wide awake, staring blankly at the acoustic ceiling tiles, endlessly wondering exactly how my own biological twin sister could have maliciously orchestrated such a horrific murder attempt, and significantly more terrifyingly, exactly what catastrophic event she might attempt to execute next. I urgently need to pause the narrative right here for a brief moment. If you have ever felt completely, utterly invisible inside your own family dynamic, if you have ever been the specific individual they conveniently forgot to invite to milestones, the individual they maliciously gossiped about behind closed doors instead of engaging with directly, I truly, deeply see you. This explosive story is absolutely not over yet. The unvarnished truth is about to violently explode into the light in a manner Harper absolutely never anticipated. If this narrative is heavily resonating within your soul, please hit that subscribe button right now and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Have you ever unexpectedly discovered a massive, dark family secret that permanently changed the trajectory of your entire life? Now, let us dive directly back into exactly what happened next. Harper dramatically arrived at my hospital room at exactly 9 a.m. the very next morning. She aggressively swept into my sterile room clutching a massive, expensive bouquet of pristine white lilies. It was an incredibly, sickeningly ironic choice, considering those are traditionally recognized as funeral flowers. And, of course, massive, theatrical tears were already aggressively streaming down her flawless face. "Oh my absolute God, Haley." She frantically rushed to my bedside, aggressively grabbing my injured hand. "I was so incredibly, profoundly worried when I heard you suffered another dramatic allergic reaction." I aggressively called 911 immediately upon hearing directly behind her confidently strutted mom, dad, and two distant aunts I barely even recognized. The grand, theatrical performance had officially commenced. "We were absolutely terrified for your life," Mom stated, delicately dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with a tissue. Thank God Harper possessed the brilliant presence of mind to call the authorities. Aunt Patricia, Mom's equally toxic sister, gently patted Harper's shoulder. "You are such an incredibly devoted, loving sister, inherently always looking out for her well-being." I silently, coldly watched all of them. The heavily manufactured expressions of concern, the deeply sympathetic, performative head tilts. Not a single, solitary one of them had bothered to send me a simple birthday text message yesterday. She has inherently always been incredibly, ridiculously dramatic regarding her alleged allergies, Mom loudly informed the attending nurse who entered to check my morning vitals. Ever since she was a tiny child, we have desperately tried our hardest to help her manage the issue, but it is a severe, documented, life-threatening medical condition, the nurse stated completely flatly, entirely unimpressed with the performance. "She very nearly died last night." Mom aggressively waved a manicured hand in the air. "Yes, well, she is obviously perfectly fine now." Harper aggressively squeezed my hand again. "We desperately tried to include you in the massive celebration party, Haley. I specifically told Mom you absolutely must attend. But you explicitly stated you were feeling entirely too sick to come. Do you remember saying that?" I had absolutely not uttered a single word to them, because absolutely no one had bothered to invite me. Aunt Patricia leaned in incredibly close to my face. "Honey, you desperately need to start taking significantly better care of yourself. You absolutely cannot keep terrifying this poor family with these dramatic stunts." I desperately wanted to violently scream at them. I wanted to aggressively hurl the massive bouquet of funeral lilies directly into Harper's smug face. I wanted to violently demand exactly why she maliciously called 911 to explicitly state I was faking the reaction before I even physically consumed the poisoned food and realized I urgently needed help. But I didn't say a single word. Not quite yet. Instead, I forced a tight smile and said, "Thank you absolutely all for taking the time to visit me today." And I closely watched Harper's smug smile violently flicker for just a fraction of a second when she slowly realized I was absolutely not going to play along with her toxic narrative. They completely fulfilled their perceived social duty and abandoned the room exactly an hour later. Their pathetic consciences entirely cleared. I patiently waited until the hospital hallway was completely empty. Then I urgently texted Daniel. He had generously provided me with his personal cell phone number right before I was officially admitted. He explicitly told me to reach out immediately if I managed to remember absolutely anything highly important regarding the incident. I explicitly remembered something incredibly important. All right. He arrived at the hospital directly during his scheduled lunch break, still fully dressed in his paramedic uniform. "You physically look significantly better today," he noted, pulling a plastic chair incredibly close to my bed. "I desperately need to show you something explosive," I stated. I handed him my unlocked cell phone, displaying the high-resolution photograph I had cautiously taken of the pristine cupcakes before consuming them. "Sweet Beginnings Bakery," he read the printed label aloud. "That is an incredibly nice establishment. My own sister frequently orders custom cakes from there." "Do they?" explicitly utilize almond flour in their kitchen? I asked, my heart pounding. Absolutely not. That is their entire massive marketing gimmick. They are an entirely, strictly nut-free bakery facility. My young niece suffers from severe nut allergies. That is exactly why we exclusively shop there. My stomach violently plummeted toward the floorboards. Then those specific cupcakes absolutely did not originate from sweet beginnings. Daniel's facial expression instantly hardened into freezing stone. He aggressively pulled out his own cell phone and initiated a phone call. Hey, Martinez. I urgently need a massive favor. Can you please verify if there is still a pink cupcake box currently logged in the evidence locker from last night's emergency call at the Parsons apartment? A heavy pause. He nodded his head firmly. Please bring it directly to Mercy General immediately, and inspect the printed label incredibly carefully. Exactly 20 minutes later, Martinez arrived at my room holding a sealed plastic evidence bag. Safely tucked inside was the pristine pink box. Daniel forcefully pointed directly at the bottom corner of the printed label. Do you clearly see this detail? The physical edges are visibly peeling backward. There is an entirely different label hidden directly underneath it. He carefully put on sterile latex gloves and meticulously, slowly lifted the top counterfeit sticker away. Resting directly beneath it, Harvest Moon Bakery. Premium. Specialty almond flour treats. Someone intentionally, maliciously purchased these specific baked goods from a facility that exclusively specializes in high almond products, Daniel stated incredibly slowly. Then, they aggressively slapped a counterfeit label directly over the original. A label specifically originating from a notoriously nut-free bakery. So that I absolutely wouldn't check the ingredients. So that I absolutely wouldn't suspect a thing. Someone explicitly, maliciously wanted me to consume those cupcakes. Someone who intimately knew exactly what horrific medical reaction would occur. And that specific someone had confidently signed the greeting card using my twin sister's exact name. I desperately needed absolute, undeniable proof. Ironclad, digital proof. Daniel casually mentioned he possessed a highly trusted friend named Marcus who professionally worked in advanced digital forensics, the highly specific kind of expert who successfully recovers deleted encrypted files for massive, high-stakes divorce settlements and severe corporate fraud investigations. There highly likely might be something explosive hidden online, I told Marcus later, over the phone. When Harper and I were teenagers, my controlling mother aggressively set up a massive, shared family iCloud account to obsessively monitor our digital activities. I was aggressively kicked off the main account the exact day I fled the house, but I absolutely still remember the primary administrator password. My arrogant mother absolutely never changes her security settings. That is absolutely not enough to serve as legal, admissible court evidence, Marcus stated flatly. We would strictly need them to voluntarily hand over the raw data, or we would need to secure a federal warrant. What exactly happens if I still possess active administrative access? I countered. What if I was absolutely never technically removed from the network, but simply entirely forgotten about? A long, heavy pause hung on the line. If you can successfully authenticate your login utilizing your original credentials and the shared synced data is still actively residing there, that is technically considered your legal data, too. It operates in a highly gray legal area, but it is undeniably admissible if we meticulously document the exact chain of custody properly. I nervously attempted to input the ancient password. It flawlessly worked. My mother's sheer, unadulterated arrogance had finally, catastrophically, backfired. Marcus explicitly stated he would immediately begin digging into the archives. He offered absolutely no promises of success. 3 agonizing days slowly passed. I was officially medically discharged from the hospital ward, but I absolutely refused to return to my apartment. I physically couldn't do it. Not to that small space tainted by toxic memories of poisoned cupcakes, and near-death suffocation. Instead, I quietly checked into a cheap, obscure motel located just off the main highway. I paid entirely in untraceable cash. I informed absolutely no one of my location. On the exhausting fourth day, Marcus finally called my phone. "You urgently need to come down here and see this immediately." I aggressively drove to his office, which was a cramped, chaotic room situated directly above a noisy dry cleaner. He slowly turned his glowing laptop screen to face me. Digital text messages. Hundreds upon hundreds of synced messages directly exchanged between Harper and Mom. I aggressively started reading from exactly 1 week prior to my birthday. "Harper, the custom cupcakes are finally ready for pickup." I aggressively ensured. They utilized pure almond flour in the batter. "Mom, excellent work. If she carelessly consumes them, she will inevitably suffer a massive reaction. She absolutely never bothers to refill her expensive EpiPen prescription on time." My hands instantly went completely, terrifyingly numb. "Harper, and if she frantically attempts to dial 911 for help, I will proactively call the dispatchers first. I will explicitly inform them she is highly dramatic and faking it. They absolutely won't rush the ambulances." Mom, incredibly smart. Strategy. Grandma's massive will. The inheritance absolutely cannot legally transfer to her if she is entirely incapacitated or permanently dead. I literally could not pull oxygen into my lungs. Marcus was intensely watching my facial expression with deep concern. "There is significantly more evidence here," he stated quietly. "Exact digital timestamps, embedded metadata. Absolutely. Everything perfectly checks out. This evidence is undeniably authentic. It is absolutely not fabricated." I forced myself to scroll further down the screen. "Mom, once Mother is permanently gone, we will aggressively challenge any legal will that dares to name Haley as a beneficiary, citing her severe, documented mental health history." "Harper, what exactly do you mean by mental health history?" "Mom, the highly specific one we are going to actively create for her. Deeply unstable, prone to self-harming behavior, constantly faking severe illnesses for attention. Who on earth would a judge believe over our pristine reputation?" I obsessively kept scrolling. I found even more horrific evidence. "Harper, how exactly will I possibly know the exact moment she consumes the poisoned food?" "Mom, I aggressively paid a shady maintenance worker to illegally install a covert hidden camera in her apartment building's main hallway last month. It perfectly covers her front door. We will explicitly see the exact moment she brings the pink box inside, and we will monitor exactly when her apartment lights are turned off. Harper, and then I immediately execute the 911 call." "Mom, precisely. Wait exactly 20 minutes after the lights go out. She will undeniably have consumed them by then. Initiate the call before she is capable of doing so. Aggressively plant the malicious seed that she is highly dramatic." They had been actively, obsessively watching my every move. My own biological mother had maliciously paid to install covert surveillance equipment explicitly to watch me slowly suffocate to death. One final, devastating message violently caught my eye. "Harper, should I actually sign the greeting card using my own name?" "Mom, of course you should, you idiot. If she miraculously manages to survive, you are perfectly positioned as the loving, innocent sister who generously sent sweet birthday treats. If she tragically doesn't survive, you are the devastated, grieving twin who desperately tried to reconnect before it was entirely too late. Either way the chips fall, you win the narrative." Harper, absolute genius. I slowly, deliberately closed the laptop screen. They had coldly, mathematically calculated my physical death exactly as if they were balancing a mundane corporate budget spreadsheet. Mr. Bennett's private legal office was absolutely nothing like I had originally anticipated. Absolutely no imposing mahogany desks, no plush, intimidating leather chairs. Just a highly modest, functional space located above a quiet, independent bookstore, chaotically cluttered with towering stacks of legal files and smelling faintly of stale black coffee. He appeared to be in his late 60s. He possessed thick, silver hair, incredibly kind, observant eyes, and a firm handshake that felt exactly like a solemn promise. Your beloved grandmother lovingly spoke about you incredibly often, he stated warmly, graciously gesturing for me to sit down. She was so incredibly, profoundly proud of the woman you are. I genuinely almost lost my emotional composure right then and there. He slowly slid a thick, heavy manila envelope completely across the desk. My full name was elegantly written across the front, in Grandma's familiar, shaky cursive handwriting. She meticulously prepared this specific document exactly 2 years ago, he calmly explained. The morning immediately following Thanksgiving 2023, she frantically called my private line the very next morning and aggressively insisted I come to her estate immediately. Exactly what horrific thing happened at Thanksgiving? Mr. Bennett visibly hesitated for a moment. She accidentally overheard something incredibly disturbing. A hushed, toxic conversation between your mother and your sister. It deeply, profoundly disturbed her soul. I carefully opened the heavy envelope with violently trembling hands. Tucked safely inside was a highly official legal document, the last will and testament of Eleanor Grace Whitmore. I frantically scanned the dense, legal pages. Dense, bureaucratic language, formal clauses, and then I hereby legally, irrevocably, leave my primary historic residence located at 47 Maple Drive, currently valued at approximately $1.2 million exclusively to my beloved granddaughter, Haley and Parsons. I further explicitly leave my entire primary savings account, currently containing approximately $300,000 exclusively to Haley and Parsons. I slowly looked up, utterly stunned. This absolutely cannot be correct. It is entirely correct. Mr. Bennett's voice was absolute, unyielding steel. Your grandmother aggressively altered her final will immediately following that Thanksgiving dinner. She explicitly told me she had clearly heard your mother maliciously state, once the old bat is permanently gone, we will aggressively ensure Haley doesn't receive a single pathetic penny. She is incredibly weak. She absolutely won't fight us in court. My vision violently blurred with thick, hot tears. There was a handwritten letter, safely tucked directly behind the legal will. I instantly recognized Grandma's elegant handwriting. My dearest, beautiful Haley, I am so profoundly, deeply sorry I absolutely could not protect you significantly more while I was alive. But this specific legal document is my ultimate way of aggressively ensuring you possess a secure, brilliant future. Absolutely no matter what horrific things they attempt to do. To you, you are fiercely, unconditionally loved. Never, ever forget that truth. She explicitly knew. She had inherently always known exactly what they were. Mr. Bennett quietly refilled his coffee mug, generously offering me a cup. I absolutely couldn't even hold the ceramic cup without violently shaking. We can easily, seamlessly handle this entire situation incredibly quietly, he stated reassuringly. We can formally file the final will, legally transfer the massive assets, and patiently let the legal system seamlessly run its intended course. You absolutely never have to see their toxic faces again. I sat there and thought deeply about his proposal. Really, truly thought about it. The quiet, peaceful option. The incredibly safe, risk-free option. Confidently walk away with Grandma's massive house and significant wealth and simply pretend my own biological mother and twin sister hadn't actively, maliciously attempted to murder me. But then exactly what would happen? They would absolutely still possess total control over their fabricated narrative. Poor, dramatic Haley. Inherently always wildly exaggerating everything. They would maliciously spread the toxic lies to all the aunts, the uncles, the distant cousins. They would aggressively reshaped the family history until I was permanently cast as the unhinged villain. And infinitely worse, they would absolutely never, ever be forced to answer for their horrific crimes. No, I stated with absolute finality. Mr. Bennet slowly raised a silver eyebrow in surprise. They desperately need to publicly answer for exactly what they did to me. And absolutely not just to me, but to absolutely everyone they have systematically lied to. He intensely studied my face for a very long, silent moment, then offered a slow, approving nod. Exactly what explosive plan do you have in mind? A mandatory, full family meeting hosted directly at the hospital, held inside Grandma's private room. But she is currently trapped in a deep coma? Not exactly, I countered. I aggressively pulled out my smartphone and displayed the urgent text message I had received from Grandma's attending neurologist that very morning. Dr. Patel explicitly states her internal brain activity has massively, significantly increased over the past 3 days. She is actively responding to familiar voices, forcefully squeezing hands when prompted. He strongly believes she might currently be in what the medical community terms a minimally conscious state, fully aware of her surroundings, but physically unable to respond fully. Yet, that is absolutely remarkable, miraculous progress, he noted, visibly impressed. Strong, aggressive emotional stimulation occasionally helps comatose patients emerge. Massive family gatherings, highly familiar, intense voices. I firmly met his eyes. I desperately want her to hear the unvarnished truth spoken out loud, even if she is physically incapable of responding right now. And if there is absolutely any microscopic chance she miraculously wakes up during this confrontation, I want her to clearly see exactly who her real, loyal family truly is. I aggressively leaned forward across his desk. I desperately want her to know that the absolute truth was finally told, even if she cannot physically respond. And I want absolutely everyone in that family to be a captive witness to it. Mr. Bennet carefully considered the aggressive proposition. It would undeniably need to be handled incredibly carefully, legally, medically, and ethically. Are you capable of officially arranging it? I absolutely am. That exact same evening, I confidently called Harper's cell phone. There is a mandatory, urgent family meeting scheduled at the hospital tomorrow morning, I stated, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Mr. Bennet, Grandma's primary estate attorney, will be physically present. It explicitly concerns the final status of Grandma's will. Total, suffocating silence echoed on the line. 1 agonizing second. 2 seconds. Then, fine. I will absolutely be there. She desperately tried to make her vocal tone sound entirely casual and unbothered. But I clearly heard the unmistakable, violent tremor of pure panic hidden underneath. She possessed absolutely no idea what explosive evidence I currently held. She possessed no idea what devastating hellfire was rapidly approaching. Good, I replied and abruptly disconnected the call. Grandma's private hospital room had absolutely never felt so incredibly small and claustrophobic. 12 affluent people were aggressively crammed inside the space. 3 distant aunts, 2 highly judgmental uncles, 5 nosy cousins. Dad quietly stood in the absolute farthest corner, remaining completely silent and invisible, exactly as he always did. And standing prominently in the absolute center of the room were Mom and Harper, both draped entirely in expensive, designer black clothing, exactly as if they were already attending a formal funeral service. Grandma lay perfectly still in her mechanical bed. The medical monitors beeped their steady, rhythmic cadence, but noticeably, significantly faster than previously. I explicitly noticed the change. The attending nurse had privately informed me that her vital signs had been significantly elevated all morning, exactly as if she intrinsically knew something massive was impending. When I initially walked into the room and softly whispered, "I am right here, Grandma," her frail hand visibly, aggressively, twitched just slightly. But I explicitly saw the movement. She was violently fighting her way back to the surface for us. I quietly took my usual submissive position, standing by the window, completely invisible as always. That was perfectly fine. I would absolutely not remain invisible for much longer. Mr. Bennett confidently stood at the absolute foot of Grandma's hospital bed, his heavy leather briefcase resting securely at his side. Mom aggressively spoke up first, attempting to control the narrative. I want to deeply thank absolutely all of you for coming today. As you are all intimately aware, Mother's medical condition is highly critical. Harper, acting as her officially designated medical proxy, will be aggressively making all final decisions regarding her palliative care moving forward. Harper offered a grave, solemn nod. The absolute perfect, curated picture of a highly responsible, grieving granddaughter. We absolutely should also discuss the impending status of her estate, Mom smoothly continued, simply to proactively ensure a seamless, conflict-free transition. When the tragic time ultimately comes, Uncle Robert, Mom's older brother, shifted incredibly uncomfortably in his stance. Victoria, Eleanor is absolutely not dead yet. I am perfectly aware of that fact, Robert. I am simply being highly practical. Mr. Bennett loudly cleared his throat, commanding the room's attention. Actually, he stated clearly, I was the specific individual who requested this meeting. The entire room instantly went completely dead still. I have served as Eleanor's exclusive private attorney for over 23 years. He confidently pulled a massive, thick envelope from his leather briefcase. And there has been a highly significant, explosive development that permanently changes absolutely everything. Mom's flawless composure visibly cracked. Just a microscopic hairline fracture, but it was there. What specific development are you referring to? Your mother proactively left highly specific, ironclad legal instructions. A finalized will meticulously prepared exactly 2 years ago, featuring highly explicit conditions regarding exactly how it should be read. Harper's voice was entirely too bright and artificially cheerful. We are completely, fully aware of Mother's legal will. Harper and I are the absolute primary, sole beneficiaries. You are fully aware of an outdated will. Mr. Bennett corrected her smoothly. But you are absolutely not aware of this specific one. The crowded room went terrifyingly quiet. For the absolute first time in my entire existence, I was completely not invisible. Every single pair of eyes was intensely focused on the heavy envelope resting in his hands. Mr. Bennett slowly, deliberately tore open the envelope flap. I, Eleanor Grace Whitmore, being of absolutely sound mind and legal capacity, do hereby explicitly revoke all previous wills and codicils. Mom's face instantly went a sickly shade of pale. He continued reading flawlessly. I hereby legally bequeath my primary historic residence located at 47 Maple Drive to my beloved granddaughter, Haley and Parsons. I further legally bequeath the entirety of my primary savings account exclusively to Haley and Parsons. Harper violently shot to her feet. That is mathematically, legally impossible. Mr. Bennett, please sit back down immediately. This is blatant, verifiable fraud. Harper's voice aggressively cracked with raw panic. Haley maliciously manipulated her weakened mind. Grandma would absolutely never. The will was formally signed and heavily notarized exactly 2 years ago. Mr. Bennett's authoritative tone absolutely did not waver an inch. It has been vigorously authenticated by 2 independent, elite legal experts. It is entirely, undeniably legally binding. I slowly glanced over at Dad. He was staring blankly at the legal document, his face the color of wet ash. You explicitly knew about this, he whispered. Not directed at me, but directly at Mom. You explicitly told me Eleanor permanently changed her will to include Harper entirely equally. You maliciously lied to me. Mom's eyes flashed with pure, unadulterated fury. Greg, absolutely not right now. All these agonizing years, all these relentless, toxic lies. His voice violently cracked. What else exactly do I not know about you? Mom finally located her lost voice, desperately attempting to regain control. Mother was clearly suffering from severe confusion. She routinely experienced prolonged moments of severe dementia. She explicitly underwent a comprehensive cognitive evaluation exactly 1 month prior to signing this document. The flawless medical results are securely attached to the file. Her mind was entirely, perfectly sound. Aunt Patricia slowly looked back and forth between Mom and me. Victoria, did you explicitly know anything about this betrayal? Of course, I absolutely didn't. This is obviously some kind of massive, catastrophic clerical mistake. Cousin. James abruptly spoke up from the back. Wait a second. Exactly why on earth would Grandma maliciously leave absolutely everything exclusively to Haley? I genuinely thought Victoria and Harper were explicitly handling absolutely all of her financial affairs. An incredibly excellent question, Mr. Bennett smoothly pulled out a secondary document. Your grandmother intentionally included a deeply personal letter explicitly explaining her decision. She strictly mandated that it be read aloud to the entire family. No, Mom's voice was sharp, desperate, and terrified. That absolutely will not be necessary. I am desperately afraid it is entirely necessary. Mr. Bennett slowly looked over at me. Miss Parsons, your grandmother explicitly wanted you to make the final decision. Every single eye in the crowded room violently turned to focus entirely on me. I stood proudly by the window, my hands perfectly steady for the absolute first time in days. Read it, I commanded softly. Harper frantically looked at Mom. Something massive and dark passed violently between them. Absolute panic, sheer desperation, suffocating guilt, perhaps an explosive combination of all three. Mom's curated composure completely, utterly shattered. Mr. Bennett, I really must aggressively insist that you. The letter, please, I forcefully repeated, and the entire room fell dead silent. Mr. Bennett carefully unfolded Grandma's fragile, handwritten letter. The aged paper trembled ever so slightly in his steady hands. Thanksgiving, 2023. He began reading loudly. I accidentally overheard my biological daughter Victoria aggressively tell Harper, once I'm permanently gone, we will aggressively ensure Haley doesn't receive a single pathetic penny. She is incredibly weak. She absolutely won't fight us in court. Horrified gasps violently rippled through the crowded room. He continued seamlessly. That specific day I unequivocally knew I desperately needed to fiercely protect my Haley. She is the absolute only person who faithfully visits me because she genuinely loves me, not because she aggressively wants to extract something from me. Mom was violently shaking her head in frantic denial. Mother was deeply confused. She completely misheard the conversation. I am absolutely not confused in the slightest. Mr. Bennett's voice grew infinitely stronger, perfectly channeling Grandma's unyielding spirit. Victoria has spent 30 entire years aggressively resenting Haley simply because Haley strongly reminds me of my beloved, deceased husband. Harper has spent her entire existence enthusiastically learning pure cruelty directly from her mother. I silently watched the abuse. I tragically stayed silent. I was an absolute, pathetic coward. Heavy tears rapidly streamed down my face, but I absolutely will not remain silent anymore. Haley inherently deserves significantly better than the toxic family she was unfortunately born into. So, I am aggressively giving her a genuine chance at a real, unburdened life. I deeply pray she uses the resources incredibly well. Mr. Bennett slowly lowered the devastating letter. Uncle Robert violently turned to face Mom. Victoria, is this horrific accusation actually true? Of course it is absolutely not true. Mother was undeniably senile. She was absolutely not senile. I aggressively stepped forward from the shadows. And she absolutely wasn't wrong. All eyes immediately locked onto me now. You desperately want to know exactly Why Grandma aggressively cut you out of the legacy? Because she intimately knew exactly what horrific things you are truly capable of. I slowly pulled my smartphone out of my pocket. And exactly 2 weeks ago, I brutally found out the absolute truth too. Harper's face instantly went the color of stark white. Chalk. What exactly is that? Encrypted text messages explicitly exchanged between you and Mom. Meticulously planning to send me birthday cupcakes. Secretly baked with lethal almond flour. Meticulously planning to maliciously call 911 before I could, specifically to inform them I was faking the reaction, so they wouldn't rush to save my life. Those are absolutely, completely fake. Harper violently screamed, pure panic erupting. They have been aggressively, forensically authenticated by an elite digital forensics expert. Verifiable. Timestamps, embedded metadata, absolutely everything. Aunt Patricia's trembling hand violently flew up to cover her gaping mouth. You actively, maliciously tried to murder your own biological sister? The entire room violently erupted into absolute chaos. This is the exact, explosive moment absolutely everything permanently changes. The toxic texts are completely out in the open. The entire extended family finally knows the truth, and Harper and Victoria possess absolutely nowhere left to hide from the consequences. If you are still sitting here with me, if this incredible story has you teetering on the absolute edge of your seat, please drop a comment and tell me, do you genuinely believe they deserve exactly the brutal karma that is coming for them? And absolutely do not forget to hit that like button so significantly more survivors can see this powerful message. Now, let us witness exactly how the family violently reacts to the truth. I aggressively read the horrifying text messages out loud, ensuring every single damning word was heard. The cupcakes are perfectly ready. I aggressively ensured they utilized pure almond flour. If she carelessly eats them, she will inevitably suffer a massive reaction. She absolutely never refills her EpiPen on time. And if she frantically calls 911, I will proactively call them first. I will explicitly tell them she is highly dramatic. They absolutely won't rush to the scene. The hospital room was an absolute, unadulterated chaos. Distant cousins frantically whispering. Aunts openly, violently crying. Uncle Robert had his heavy hand clamped tightly over his mouth exactly as if he might physically vomit. Harper desperately attempted one absolute, final, pathetic lie. Those messages are entirely fake. She maliciously edited them to frame me. I remained completely, terrifyingly calm. The digital messages are securely backed up on the Central Family iCloud account. Mr. Bennett has successfully verified them with a certified, elite forensics expert. The digital timestamps perfectly match. The hidden metadata is entirely intact. The legal chain of custody is meticulously documented. She is pathologically lying. I am absolutely not asking any of you to blindly believe me. I slowly looked around the room at every single shocked face. I am explicitly asking you to blindly believe the irrefutable scientific evidence. Mom had not moved a single inch, had not spoken a single syllable since the horrific texts were read aloud. Her perfectly styled, expensive hair seemed incredibly wrong now, deeply obscene against the horrifying context of what she had actively attempted to orchestrate. Aunt Patricia slowly walked across the room toward me. She gently took both of my trembling hands in hers. Haley, she whispered, her voice cracking. I am so incredibly, profoundly sorry. I blindly believed their toxic lies for years. I completely believed absolutely everything they maliciously said about you. I offered a slow nod. I physically couldn't speak. Uncle Robert confidently crossed the room to stand protectively beside me. I violently defended you for 20 entire years, Victoria. I explicitly told absolutely everyone Haley was just wildly exaggerating the abuse. I foolishly believed you. Mom finally looked up from the floor. Robert, please. Enough. His voice violently broke. I am Permanently, entirely done with you. Harper was still violently crying, but the tears looked fundamentally different now. Not performative grief, not fake. Remorse. Pure, unadulterated, suffocating fear. She desperately grabbed Mom's arm. We absolutely need to leave right now. They frantically started toward the exit door, and then a voice. Incredibly weak, barely audible, but undeniably unmistakable. Victoria. Everyone in the room completely froze in terror. Grandma's eyes were fully, brilliantly open. The entire room went absolutely, terrifyingly still. Grandma's medical monitors began beeping significantly. Faster. An attending nurse frantically rushed in, quickly checked her vitals, and then physically stepped backward in pure, unadulterated shock. She is actually awake, the stunned nurse breathed. She is miraculously actually awake. Grandma's sharp eyes moved incredibly slowly around the crowded room, finally, landing directly on Mom and remaining intensely locked there. Mother. Victoria's voice violently cracked with terror. Mother, you are miraculously awake. Please, just let me explain absolutely everything. I heard. Grandma's voice was barely a raspy whisper. But in that absolutely silent room, it sounded exactly like rolling thunder. I explicitly heard absolutely everything. Mom took a desperate step closer to the bed. You absolutely do not understand the context. Haley has been aggressively, maliciously manipulating you for years. She is absolutely not who you falsely think she is. Stop. Exactly one single commanding word. Grandma uttered exactly one word, and Victoria completely froze. Mid-step. I aggressively protected your toxic behavior your entire miserable life. Grandma's fragile chest rose and fell with immense effort. I constantly excused your blatant jealousy, your inherent cruelty. I desperately told myself you would eventually grow out of the phase. Mom, but maliciously attempting to murder my Haley. Grandma slowly closed her eyes for a long moment. When they reopened, they were as hard and unforgiving as forged steel. You are absolutely, permanently no longer considered my daughter. Victoria let out a horrific sound. Something terrifyingly caught between a violent sob and a primal scream. Harper frantically rushed forward to the bed. Grandma, please. It absolutely wasn't. We absolutely didn't mean to. I joyously held you when you were first born. Grandma's intense gaze violently shifted to Harper. I genuinely, foolishly, thought you inherited your grandfather's immense kindness. I fervently prayed you wouldn't mutate into a monster exactly like your mother. A single, heavy tear slowly rolled down her weathered cheek. I was catastrophically wrong. Harper violently backed away, her flawless face completely crumbling into dust. Grandma slowly turned her head. Her eyes finally found me. Come here, my sweetheart. I slowly walked to her bedside on violently shaking legs. I gently took her hand. It was incredibly warm this time, radiantly alive. I am so profoundly sorry I couldn't successfully protect you significantly sooner, she whispered fiercely. But now you must aggressively protect yourself. You absolutely do not need them anymore. I explicitly know that, Grandma. Promise. Me. I solemnly promise. Directly behind me, I clearly heard the heavy hospital door open, and then click firmly shut. Victoria and Harper were permanently gone, but their horrific, toxic damage absolutely wasn't. Not entirely yet. The crowded hospital room slowly, awkwardly emptied out after that explosive climax. Aunts and uncles quietly left in pairs, softly murmuring desperate apologies as they awkwardly passed me. Cousin James fiercely squeezed my shoulder in solidarity. Cousin Michelle aggressively hugged me so incredibly tight I genuinely couldn't pull oxygen into my lungs, but in a profoundly good, healing way this time. Dad awkwardly lingered by the exit door. Haley. His voice was incredibly small, utterly defeated. I am so profoundly sorry. I intensely looked at him. I really, truly looked at him for the very first time in years. The cowardly man who absolutely never, ever defended me, who never bravely spoke up, who absolutely never once consciously chose my survival over his toxic wife's cruelty. I explicitly know you are. I absolutely should have. Yes, you. Absolutely should have. I didn't say it with burning anger, just with a unvarnished, brutal truth. But you absolutely didn't. He offered a slow, defeated nod. He completely couldn't meet my eyes. I am officially filing for a divorce tomorrow morning, he stated incredibly quietly. Whatever horrific things she did, whatever they maliciously did. I absolutely can't, he trailed off. Helplessly. That is entirely a matter between you and her. He quietly left the room without uttering another single word. The attending nurse quickly returned to check on Grandma's vitals. She explicitly stated she urgently needed uninterrupted rest. The massive excitement had been entirely too taxing on her fragile system. I sat peacefully beside her bed, gently holding her warm hand, silently watching her slowly drift back to sleep. But this specific sleep felt fundamentally different. It was deeply healing, absolutely not hiding from the world. She will urgently require extensive rehabilitation, the attending doctor informed me later that afternoon. Intensive speech therapy, rigorous physical therapy. It will undoubtedly be an incredibly long, grueling road. I will absolutely be right here for every second of it. I can clearly see that. He smiled warmly. It was the absolute first genuine, unforced kindness I had felt from a stranger in agonizing weeks. She is incredibly lucky to possess you. Lucky. An incredibly funny word. I absolutely did not feel lucky in the slightest. I felt completely hollowed out, utterly exhausted, exactly like I had just successfully climbed a massive mountain only to discover another towering peak waiting for me. But also, and this was entirely beautifully new, I felt profoundly free. Absolutely no more exhausting pretending, absolutely no more falsely smiling through their malicious cruelty, absolutely no more desperately hoping they would miraculously love me if I just relentlessly tried harder. They had aggressively, explicitly shown me exactly who they truly were. And for the absolute first time in my entire existence, I finally believed them. Exactly 2 weeks later, the brutal, legal consequences officially arrived. Detective Maria Santos from the Millbrook Police Department formally called my phone on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Miss Parsons, based entirely upon the overwhelming digital evidence you provided, the encrypted text messages, the certified forensics report, the hospital medical records, we are officially pressing severe felony charges against Harper Parsons for reckless endangerment, with explicit intent to cause severe bodily harm. I violently gripped my phone tighter. And your biological mother, Victoria Parsons, is currently being aggressively charged as a criminal accessory. She explicitly helped maliciously plan the attack and actively tried to severely interfere with the emergency medical response. Attack? That is exactly what it legally was. A violent, premeditated attack orchestrated by my own biological family. What exactly happens now? They will be officially arraigned in federal court next week. Given the overwhelming mountain of evidence, the district attorney is incredibly confident we will secure massive convictions. Harper is currently looking at 1 to 5 years in a state facility. Your mother is facing highly similar severe charges. I quietly thanked her, hung up the phone, and simply sat in absolute silence for a very long time. The explosive news rapidly spread fast. Harper's lucrative company, a highly prestigious corporate marketing firm downtown, saw the sensational story blasted on the local evening news. She was brutally terminated within 48 hours. The official corporate reason provided was conduct severely unbecoming of a company representative. The actual, unvarnished reason was that absolutely nobody wanted a potential convicted murderer in training actively managing their lucrative brand. Victoria's elite country club friends completely stopped returning her desperate phone calls. The Prestigious charity board she proudly sat on quietly, seamlessly removed her name from their website. Exclusive invitations permanently dried up. Extravagant lunch dates were abruptly canceled with highly vague, pathetic excuses. And Dad, quiet, cowardly, passive dad, officially filed for a contested divorce. He quickly moved into a cheap hotel, then a modest apartment, and then slowly, he cautiously started calling my phone. I absolutely do not expect an ounce of your forgiveness, he stated during one particularly heavy call. I explicitly know I catastrophically failed your soul. You undeniably did. I just desperately want you to know. I finally see the truth now. Exactly what they maliciously did. Exactly what I cowardly let them do. Simply seeing the abuse is absolutely not the same thing as aggressively stopping it. No. His voice violently cracked over the line. It absolutely isn't. I explicitly didn't say I forgave him. I honestly wasn't sure I ever would. But I also didn't aggressively hang up the phone either. Microscopic progress, I guess. Incredibly slow and highly uncertain. Exactly like absolutely everything else in this healing process. The very first time I proudly walked into Grandma's sprawling house as its sole legal owner, I violently cried. Not sad, broken tears. Not burning, angry tears. Something else entirely different. Profound relief, perhaps, or sheer, unadulterated disbelief. The historic house located at 47 Maple Drive was a stunning, sprawling Victorian revival. Pristine white siding, classic blue shutters, and a massive wraparound porch where Grandma used to peacefully drink sweet iced tea and quietly watch the golden sunset. I had spent absolutely every single summer here as a young kid, back when Mom still barely tolerated my existence, long before Harper aggressively morphed into her permanent golden child and I slowly morphed into the invisible ghost. I slowly walked through every single room. The warm kitchen still faintly smelled exactly like fresh lemon cookies. The grand living room still featured Grandpa's favorite leather chair positioned by the bay window, entirely untouched since he tragically died 15 years ago. Upstairs, safely inside Grandma's massive bedroom, I discovered a battered shoebox hidden deep in the closet. Inside it, every single chaotic drawing I had ever lovingly made for her, every single awkward poem I had ever written, every single handmade birthday card since I was exactly 5 years old. She had meticulously, fiercely kept absolutely everything. I sat heavily on her bed and violently sobbed until I literally couldn't pull oxygen into my lungs. Daniel surprisingly came by that exact same evening. We had been communicating significantly more since the terrifying hospital incident. He had slowly become something I absolutely didn't expect. A genuine, fierce friend. Perhaps something significantly more eventually, but there was absolutely zero rush. How exactly does it feel? He asked softly. Finally possessing a safe place of your very own. I slowly looked around the massive porch, staring at the wooden swing where Grandma and I had spent countless, beautiful hours. It feels exactly like I finally, truly belong somewhere in this universe. He offered a warm smile. He absolutely didn't say anything else. He intrinsically didn't need to. Later that exact night, I proudly hung a framed photograph on the main living room wall. Grandma and me joyously celebrating at her 75th birthday party. The absolute only photograph from my entire childhood where we are both genuinely, hysterically laughing. I gently traced her smiling face with my fingertip. I will fiercely take care of it, I whispered softly into the quiet room. I solemnly promise. Outside, the vibrant sun slowly set over Maple Drive, casting brilliant golden light through the ancient, wavy windows, carrying the intoxicating smell of aged wood, pure memory, and absolute home. For the absolute first time in 25 agonizing years, I was absolutely not an afterthought. I was exactly, perfectly where I was fundamentally meant to be. The unexpected text message from Harper finally arrived exactly a month later. Can we please just talk? I desperately want to offer an apology. Please. I blankly stared at my phone screen for a very long time. A massive part of my soul desperately wanted to aggressively ignore it, permanently block her phone number, and violently pretend she simply didn't exist anymore. But another smaller part, the exact part that still tragically remembered sharing a warm womb with her, sharing milestone birthdays, sharing an identical physical face, that specific part desperately needed to say something final. I typed incredibly carefully, meticulously edited the message 3 separate times, and then finally hit send. Harper, I absolutely do not hate you. Harboring active hatred requires a massive expenditure of emotional energy I absolutely do not want to waste on you. But I absolutely do not trust you. And I explicitly do not want you in my life. This is absolutely not petty revenge. This is a permanent, ironclad boundary. Please respect it. Then I permanently blocked her number. Mom absolutely never, ever reached out. I strongly think she was entirely too arrogant and proud. Or perhaps her expensive defense lawyers explicitly instructed her not to communicate. Either way, the suffocating silence was an absolute beautiful gift. Dad consistently called my phone exactly once a week. We primarily talked about absolutely nothing important. The shifting weather, his mundane new apartment, exactly how Grandma was miraculously progressing in her intense rehab facility. Tiny, microscopic steps towards building something that might never, ever fully heal. I absolutely should have violently fought for you, he stated quietly one night. Every single time they maliciously pushed you aside, I absolutely should have aggressively said something. Yes, you absolutely should have. I was an absolute, pathetic coward. You undeniably were. I paused, letting the truth settle. But at the very least, you are finally being honest about it now. Grandma was making miraculous, incredible progress. Her speech was rapidly returning, right alongside her legendary, fierce stubbornness. She would, unfortunately, be remaining in the rehabilitation center for a few more grueling months, but the attending doctors were incredibly optimistic about her recovery. You are infinitely stronger than they ever gave you credit for, she proudly told me during my absolute last visit. I inherently always knew you possessed that fire. I slowly learned it entirely from you. She fiercely squeezed my hand. I am so incredibly, profoundly proud of you, Haley. Absolutely. Not for inheriting the massive house, absolutely not for securing the money, but for bravely standing up, for aggressively setting ironclad boundaries. Yes, she offered a warm smile. That is undeniably the absolute hardest thing of all to execute. I was finally, successfully learning exactly how. I am currently peacefully sitting on the massive porch of Grandma's house, my beautiful house now, quietly watching the vibrant sun go down. It has been exactly 3 long months since my explosive birthday. 3 months since I almost died entirely alone on my freezing kitchen floor. 3 months since I fully, completely discovered exactly what my toxic family was truly capable of orchestrating. Harper's criminal trial is officially scheduled for next month. Mom's criminal trial follows the exact week after. I will absolutely be forced to publicly testify against them. I am absolutely not looking forward to the grueling ordeal, but I am absolutely not terrified either. My birthday is rapidly approaching again. 26 this year. I am officially throwing a joyous party. An incredibly small, intimate one. Daniel will absolutely be there. A few fierce, loyal friends from the library. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert, who have miraculously become surprisingly, fiercely supportive of my journey. And of course, Grandma. She aggressively insists on attending, aluminum, Walker and all. You absolutely cannot keep me away from this, she stated fiercely. I have tragically missed entirely too many of your birthdays already. It absolutely won't be a massive spectacle for 200 people there. Absolutely won't be professional event photographers or a massive 3-tier custom cake. But absolutely everyone who attends will actually, genuinely want to be present in the room. That is the massive, fundamental difference. My cell phone suddenly buzzes in my pocket. Daniel's name flashes brightly on the screen. Hey, I explicitly know it is incredibly early to ask, but do you want to grab a quiet dinner sometime? As friends, or perhaps something more. Whatever you are entirely comfortable with. I smile. A genuine, bright smile for the absolute first time in a very long time. It doesn't physically hurt my face anymore. I quickly type back, dinner sounds absolutely perfect. Then I peacefully set down my phone and silently watch the final rays of light slowly fade over Maple Drive. Here is exactly what I have profoundly learned. True family is absolutely not defined merely by sharing biological blood. It is explicitly defined by exactly who aggressively shows up for you when you are literally dying alone on your kitchen floor. It is defined by exactly who violently fights for your survival when you physically cannot fight for yourself. And sometimes, the absolute best, most devastating revenge isn't enacting revenge at all. It is aggressively building a beautiful, successful life so incredibly good that your abusers become entirely irrelevant. I am absolutely no longer the invisible ghost. I am absolutely no longer the discarded afterthought, the difficult one, the shadow. I am Haley, and I am finally, truly home. A few critical, life-altering lessons I extracted from this horrific journey, and I desperately hope you carry them with you. 1. Your basic human needs are absolutely not manufactured drama. Your severe, life-threatening allergies are absolutely not a minor inconvenience. Absolutely anyone who attempts to maliciously make you feel small for aggressively protecting your own survival is absolutely not actively protecting you. 2. The specific individuals who genuinely, deeply love your soul absolutely do not conveniently forget your birthday. They absolutely do not require an engraved invitation to enthusiastically show up for your life. 3. Sometimes, the absolute quietest person standing in the room possesses the absolute loudest, most devastating truth. You absolutely do not need to violently scream to be clearly heard. You simply need undeniable, hard evidence and the unyielding courage to bravely speak it aloud. If this harrowing story moved your soul in any capacity, I would be incredibly honored to hear your unfiltered thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been violently forced to establish ironclad boundaries with a highly toxic family member? Have you ever miraculously discovered exactly who your real people truly are during a crisis? And if you are entirely new to this channel, please aggressively hit that subscribe button right now. I actively post powerful stories of survival exactly like this one every single week. There is another explosive narrative patiently waiting for you in the description box below. Thank you so incredibly much for being here with me today. Thank you for actively listening to my truth. I will see you all next time. ND slightly cool-toned, emphasizing her fierce, hard-won resilience after surviving a major trauma. The background is a highly blurred, brightly lit, sterile hospital room featuring medical monitors and the faint outline of shocked relatives staring in horror. High detail 8K resolution, dramatic and empowering atmosphere.